Yay. All right, 3D printing. How many of you guys know what 3D printing is? Anybody? A couple people, so-and-so? All right, so 3D printing is, it's not something from the future. It's not something from Star Wars or from Star Trek. It's actually used today in real life. It's used by companies, and they have home models too for people at home. And it's exactly as it sounds. It's printing in 3D. Now, the basics. Okay, 3D printers print in layers. They have a syringe-like thing that pushes out the material, whatever material it is. They work from the bottom, maybe to the top. When looking at 3D printer, think of a parking lot. When they build a parking lot, they start at the base, and they do it layer, or floor by floor, or layer by layer. So when you see a parking garage, you think of 3D printers. That's how they work. Now, what can you make with a 3D printer? They always say that 3D printers can make complex shapes. So when people think of shapes, they think of squares, rectangles, and circles. But since they print in 3D, they also can do their counterpart, their 3D counterpart, meaning boxes, prisms, and spheres. 3D printers are also based on materials they use. So plastics, sugars, metals, and other organic material. Now, there are hundreds of different types of 3D printers. We are going to go over 3 main types here in the class. They were the original 3D printers, which included plastics and metals, the bioprinting, bio-ink, which used bio-ink, and chemoprinting, which uses a computer. I chose these 3 because I feel like they are the ones that impact the world the most, and are the most important. So, starting with the original 3D printer. The original 3D printers mainly use metals and plastics, but they are using concrete more often now. They were used to make tools, kitchenware, and complex shapes. Who's seen the movie Iron Man? All right, everybody's seen the movie Iron Man. You might not know that part of his suit is actually made by 3D printers to get the complex shapes and the angles. Speaking of concrete, 3D printers have already been used to make houses. It's in the early stages, but with 2 3D printers, they were able to make 10 houses in one day. Each house cost around $5,000, so as you can imagine, it's very, very cost efficient. But they printed the places somewhere else, and then they put them together to make the house. And this was done in China. But they have also made a house in Alabama with 3D printers. Now, what is bioprinting? The idea is to take a person's cells, stem cells, and make the cells that they need for the body. They can use it to fill in gaps, and since they're using the person's cells, they're using their DNA, there's no rejection. So as you can see here, they've made an ear with bioprinting, and hopefully in the future, they want to be able to make organs like a heart. Now, computer. It was developed by Lee Cronin. It's still also in its early stages, but to get your grasp around it, the smallest a 3D printer can make is, the smallest particle a 3D printer can print is around 16 micrometers. Now, a bacteria cell is around 10 micrometers. So it's very, very small, and it has the capabilities to combine chemicals in 3D printing. You might wonder why he wants to do this. He wants people to be able to print their prescriptions at home, and it would save money and time. Okay, so we know about 3 different types of printers: the metals and plastic 3D printers, bioprinters, and computers. Now we need to look over the pros and cons. When looking at the original 3D printers, the plastics and metals, there's a lot of pros. You can make household parts, you can build at home, it's for fun. You can make what you need, parts for maybe a project you're doing, and lots of custom needs. So here's a picture of a cast actually made out of a 3D printer. Since it's made for a specific person, you can take measurements of that person and make it for them. You can also make prosthetic limbs, which has huge benefits, since prosthetic limbs are very, very expensive and hard to get. You can make it at home. So the cons, there are also a lot of cons. The initial cost of a 3D printer can range up from $1,000 to around $10,000 for a plastic one. Metal 3D printers are usually around $600,000. so they are very, very expensive. They take up a lot of space, you need blueprints. The main problem with 3D printers that are plastic is people have been learning to build weapons. 3D printed weapons. As you can see here, they built parts for guns. They've also built a full plastic gun. Do they work? Yes, they all work. There are some hiccups, but they have all been proven to work and be reliable. The problem with the full plastic gun is that it can beat metal detectors. And as you can imagine, it's a nightmare for security around the world. Now, bioprinting. The pros with bioprinting is they want to be able to treat soldiers or anybody who's had major cuts and burns to fill in the spaces where they got cuts and burns, fill in the gaps. They also want to make facial parts, cover birth defects with like cartilage, so like make another nose, make another ear for people who may have not had one or have lost it. And they also make organs. And again, no rejection, it's a big pro. The cons would be it's extremely costly, the materials would be hard to get, and you have to have professional knowledge of what you need. You need to have somebody to surgically implant everything. For the computer, creates good drugs. It's going to be, if it was at a pharmacy, it'd be used for emergencies. It'd be faster treatment and very cost efficient. Cons, if you can make good drugs, you can make bad drugs. If you can imagine making all these bad drugs, the legal uses are pretty much monumental. So, good or bad, you guys can decide if this will help the human race in the future, if it is even something in the future, and I also want you to wonder, what would you build with a 3D printer if you had one? I thought this was a cool sole for shoes that was made by a 3D printer, and I'm wondering what you guys would make.